Welcome everyone to our second video of this channel, and in fact this is the first video for our biology series. So we're going to start with the first unit of biology, which is classifying or characteristic of living organisms. And this is a pretty basic topic, is a gentle start to biology to get everyone to understand what makes an organism a living thing. So let's just get straight into it. Whenever we talk about organisms, we have to think about what makes an organism. So what makes something living? How do we classify something as a living organism or it's not actually living? So scientists, in order to make this easier, they came up with 7 criteria. You have to meet these criteria in order to become an actual organism. So let's take a look at these 7 criteria. That's why I thought we can just start with a question straight away about the 7 criteria of organisms. That's why I put these 7 letters. These are the start letters of every single one of these criteria, and you can try and work out what these 7 criteria are, these 7 requirements for something to become an organism. So just pause the video now and you can give these a go. Just find out the 7 requirements that make something a living thing. I hope you guys have a go with these criteria, and we can come back now to actually discuss what are these 7 requirements for something to become an organism. We have an abbreviation for this, is Mrs. Gren. It's easier for people to remember these 7 criteria because they are pretty important, and most students require to learn these definitions. So let's take a look. What's for M? M is for movement. R is for respiration. S is for sensitivity. G is for growth. And R is for reproduction. E is for excretion. And N is for nutrition. So these are the 7 criteria for something to become an organism. They must have all 7 requirements. Let's start with movement. Movement is a pretty simple definition, I guess. It's basically an action by an organism or part of an organism causing a change in position or place. So this basically means it moves. It's trying to move from one place to another or either shift its current position. So an example of that could be a cheetah. So a cheetah runs in order to catch its prey. So we call that a movement because the position, the place of the cheetah is literally shifted. Another example would be trees. Trees may seem stationary, but as they grow, their roots actually move across the soil. So trees are actually moving as well. Next up is a more complicated one, respiration. Some of you might be familiar with this word, some of you might not. Respiration is quite a tricky word because people used to confuse respiration with some other meanings. Basically, respiration is the chemical reactions in cells that break down nutrients molecules and release energy for metabolism. So a lot of people get confused. They thought of respiration as breathing. Well, when we talk about respiration, it's this formula right here, this complicated looking formula, but it's actually not that hard as you thought. So when we take a look at it, the 6O2 at the start is the oxygen that we intake. So every time we breathe, we are actually intaking oxygen used for respiration. And the C6H12O6 right here, we can just treat them as the food that we intake. So the nutrient molecules in the definition refers to the C6H12O6. So we are actually reacting the food molecules we've intaked to release energy from it. So one thing to not get confused with is respiration actually does not equal breathing because they are different. Breathing is the mechanical process, or we call it ventilation, of intaking oxygen. But respiration is the process of generating energy. So in order to simplify this definition, we can just generalize respiration as a process of releasing energy for that organism's own use. If an organism cannot generate energy in its own ways, then it's not living. Third criteria would be sensitivity. And its definition is the ability to detect or sense stimuli in the internal or external environment and to make appropriate responses. So this long definition basically sums up, if we can look at ourselves, the sensitivity would relate to our five senses. So for example, we can taste chocolate, we can taste the sweetness, we can sense from our surrounding what is going on. And another important component about sensitivity is we are bound to make responses whenever we sense something. So for example, a snail. If you touch a snail's eyes, it's going to contract back because it can sense an object touching it. Therefore, the response of that is to protect itself. Therefore, the eye contracts. So it is important for organisms to be able to sense what's going around them and react to it. The next one will be growth, and this one is just straightforward. It literally means growing. A fancy definition would be a permanent increase in size and dry mass by an increase in cell number or cell size or both. So the physical feature expanding, it's literally what growth means. We can take a look at, for example, plants. So the stem grows longer and taller and more leaves grow on the stem. That's a physical feature of something growing. And another fun fact about growth is organisms such as lobsters, they actually keep growing until they die. Not like human, we grow to a certain height and we stop. But lobsters, they keep growing until they die. And another important one is reproduction. And reproduction is basically the processes that make more of the same kind of organism. So the physical feature of fertilization, basically, when sperm meets an egg. And think about it with common sense. It's actually important for an organism to be able to reproduce. Because if an organism does not have the ability to reproduce more of its same kind, then it wouldn't survive. It wouldn't pass on its gene to the next generation. It wouldn't be able to physically make more of the same kind. So that if an organism cannot reproduce, then we would not count it as an organism. And then we have excretion. This one might be a little bit complicated because most of you might not have come across excretion. It has a long definition as well. It's the removal of from organisms of the waste products of metabolism, toxic materials, and substances in excess of requirements. So, in other words, it's just a process of getting rid of stuff that we don't need or might potentially harm us. So that example could be the kidney, where the kidney filters, for example, toxic products like the urea or excess water or salt that we do not need in our body, and we excrete them through the process of urination. And another thing people get confused with is excretion is actually not pooping, because people think pooping is the process of getting rid of waste products, right? Well, that is partially right, but then in the future episodes we will talk about why is pooping not excretion, because it's actually involved in another function. Finally, we got nutrition, and this is basically another meaning for eating. So if we take a look at the definition, it says the intake of materials for energy growth and development. Plants require light, carbon dioxide, water, and ions. Animals need organic compounds and ions and usually need water. So this basically means the physical ability to obtain food and to digest them, to obtain energy or nutrition from them. So a basic example would just be a flock of sheep maybe chewing grass, or a lion eating its prey. It's the physical movement of obtaining food, the ability to digest it and to intake what's good from it for the organism's own usage. I'd like to end this session with a pretty interesting debate going on in the biology world, is whether virus is an organism or not. Because due to the structure of virus, it does not allow it to conduct all 7 requirements for being an organism. Therefore, there's this constant argument on whether viruses are actually organisms. So if we take a look at a diagram of a virus, we can see the spikes on the outside, they're the protein spikes. And we have another layer of protein, which is the red layer here, surrounding the virus. And inside, we got that S-shaped, those string-looking patterns. Those are the DNA. So viruses are actually pretty simple in terms of their structure. And this makes them not being able to conduct several features of the 7 criteria. For example, they cannot reproduce on their own. So it does not have an ability like, for example, a bacteria. A bacteria gets to reproduce its own kind by binary fission, by physically replicating its own DNA. But whereas virus, they do not possess such ability. They cannot reproduce on their own. They require a host cell. That's why when you're infected with virus, they usually attack your cells and turn your cells into a virus factory. They need another cell to live in it, and then they need that cell to provide energy and nutrition for them to reproduce more of the same kind. So that's why scientists think that maybe they are not an organism because they cannot physically reproduce by themselves. But others think they are organisms because after all they still reproduced by simply using a host cell. So this is a rather interesting debate, and I'll leave you guys with some thought. Whether you think viruses should be categorized as an organism or not. Alright, so I guess I'll call this to an end then. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you like and you subscribe to my channel and share this to all your friends who hate sciences. Thank you very much. See you next time.